Okay.
Okay, thank you. This is Bart Schwartz, and I'd like to welcome everyone to this CAC meeting. I'll have more to say about the pandemic and the delays and cancellation of the prior meetings. But even though this is a virtual meeting and with all the problems of virtual meetings, I'm glad we're getting the opportunity to talk to each other and to try to get back into a more normal routine. So thank you for joining. Please don't be dis, disturbed by the electronic issues. We still have a lot to do and a lot to accomplish on during this meeting. Asha?
Thank you, Bart. I wanted to go through the agenda and thank everyone so much for being here with us today. This virtual session is not the ideal. We much prefer to meet in person and sit around the table, but we wanted to make sure that the work of the CAC continued. So thank you all for being here virtually. Thank you for being here on the phone and video. The way the agenda will work today, we will hear initially from Deputy Mayor Vicki Been, and then we will hear remarks from HUD Regional Administrator Lynn Patton. Following that, we'll hear an update from NYCHA Federal Monitor Bart Schwartz and an update from the NYCHA Deputy Monitor Dan Brownell. And then we'll have presentations from Eva Trimble, the NYCHA Executive Vice President for Strategy and Innovation in the Office of the Chair. And we will hear from Gina Watkins, who's the NYCHA Resident Engagement Manager, but she has a new title that we will hear from shortly. And then we'll hear from New York City Council member Alika Ampry-Samuel and DFTA Bureau of Community Services Senior Director Agnes Mack. Then we will open up for a discussion and any updates from our CAC members. And then we'll have closing remarks by NYCHA Federal Monitor Bart Schwartz. Again, because of the limitations virtually, I'm not able to see you raise your hands. So please remember to just not speak over one another so that we can have a clear discussion. And again, thank you all for being here. I will now turn it over to Deputy Mayor Vicki Been. Thank you for joining us as our special guest.
Actually, may I say something first? I would like to welcome the Deputy Mayor and thank her very much for joining us. As many of you know, with the reallocation of funds by the City Council and the Mayor, additional funds were allocated for NYCHA, and we thought it would be helpful for the Deputy Mayor to talk to us about that or any other subjects she would like to cover to explain what budget changes were made. Just as a personal note, I've been working a lot now with the Deputy Mayor since I was appointed, and it's been a pleasure to work with her. She's been very helpful, and I looked at your responsibilities, Deputy Mayor, and I see that there are over 20 agencies, offices, and affiliated entities which report to you. The list is dramatically long. So I'm going to give you a nanosecond, which is probably all you need to tell us what you do with your spare time, because I can't imagine you have any with all of these responsibilities. But I'd like to thank you for agreeing to speak, and anything you'd like to cover, please feel free to do so. So it's my pleasure to introduce Deputy Mayor Vicki Been.
Well, thank you so much, Asha, and thank you so much, Bart, and for both inviting me and for all that you're doing to help us turn NYCHA around, which when I rejoined city government, I came back because I wanted to make sure that NYCHA was turned around and provides the high quality, safe and affordable housing that our residents deserve. So I do have about, I think, 22 agencies, but NYCHA, which isn't an agency, it's an authority, but NYCHA is my favorite. So so I'm happy to be here and really delighted to talk about some of the things that we've been working on, even as the COVID crisis has unfolded. And obviously, so many people on this call and so many people in our NYCHA buildings have been affected. COVID has really transformed the lives of millions of New Yorkers, and unfortunately, we're seeing it transform the lives of really tens of millions of people across the country. And I know that COVID has forced many NYCHA residents and all of us to really have to isolate for extended periods of time, which has certainly made the need for high quality housing that's connected to the internet and that's in neighborhoods where fresh food and other things is available all the more important. And at the same time, of course, we've seen COVID really decimate our economy, overwhelm our healthcare system, and unfortunately leave all too many, nearly 20,000 New Yorkers dead. And as we mourn the loss of those people, our friends, our colleagues, our neighbors, we've also really been trying to see COVID as a lens into what we need to do to make New York not only recover, but recover more fairly. And we hope we've made it past the worst of the health impacts and will not see a resurgence like so many parts of the country are seeing, but we have to be vigilant. We've got to practice social distancing, wear our masks, take care of each other, all of those things. At the same time, we are very focused on the long road to economic recovery, and we're determined, as I said, to make this recovery fair and to make sure that it addresses the needs of all of our residents and all of our neighborhoods. And especially, I believe that a fair economic recovery has to begin with NYCHA residents. The first priority has been to keep NYCHA residents in their homes. We know that so many residents have lost their jobs. As of the end of May, the unemployment rate in New York City had risen to 18.3%, up from just 4% a year ago. And we don't have the numbers to show us exactly how many NYCHA residents have lost their jobs, but we know that they're in some of the sectors that have been hardest hit, the healthcare industries, the hospitality industries, restaurants, food service. And so we're very, very concerned about the number of our NYCHA residents who have lost their jobs. One of the key protections that we can offer and that the NYCHA system offers is that, of course, NYCHA residents who lose income can have their rent readjusted because, as you know, NYCHA rent is income-based. It's always 30% of the tenant's monthly adjusted income. And so we have been laser focused on expediting the rent hardship program to assist those residents who are experiencing job losses or other income loss. NYCHA has repurposed 15 staff members to help the tenant administration team so that we can expedite those tenant hardship applications and income research as quickly as possible. We also simplified the online form that is needed to recertify, and we now have a system where people can call the customer contact center to complete the income recertification application over the phone. And I believe that that is helping many NYCHA residents readjust their rent, what rent is due, and stay in their homes. We also suspended notices and court hearings for residents who are unable to pay rent due to COVID hardships or lags in the rent adjustments. And we're deferring for 90 days any or longer, depending on what happens with COVID, any rent increases that were scheduled to take effect before the COVID crisis hit. So all of those things are in place to allow people to quickly readjust their rent in response to an income loss. And I want to thank the chair, Greg Russ, and of course, Vito Masticella and Eva and all of her team and the NYCHA teams for really working to put into place a quick system for people to recertify so that they don't feel threatened by those rent payments. Look, but over the long term, we know that our recovery strategies have to include making sure that NYCHA residents have the training, the upskilling, the apprenticeships, the kinds of job opportunities that they need to advance in their jobs and to get a fair share in the recovering economy. So that brings me to the city's budget, which, as Bart said, has been just a very, very difficult process over the last few months, because we are seeing a fiscal crisis that we have not seen really for since the 1970s. I'm old enough to remember that. I hate to reveal, but it's something that we never wanted to see again in our lifetimes, and unfortunately are seeing. So we have, throughout this budget crisis, really tried to prioritize things that can help our residents work through the challenges that COVID has posed. We've made free testing available to residents. We've supplied personal protective equipment so that people can wear their masks, stay safe. We've performed wellness checks by calling our seniors to make sure that they're okay, other vulnerable residents to make sure that they're getting their medication, that they're signed up for food deliveries, those kinds of things. We've upgraded our cleaning schedules with third-party vendors, and Bart and his team have been very helpful there, among many other places. And we've invested $5 million in providing free tablets and internet services to our seniors so that they can keep in touch with their families, see their grandchildren, all of those things that are so important. Unfortunately, as rents fall in response to unemployment and job losses, that puts enormous pressure on the NYCHA budget. And we have been very, very active in Washington trying to secure stimulus funds that can help make up for that gap and can bring additional resources to NYCHA, which is so important. On the city budget front, we have not gotten direct relief from Congress yet for NYCHA. We continue to press, but what we are doing in terms of NYCHA's, in terms of the city's budget, is we just passed a budget on June 30th that reflected a 7.5% decrease. And that was necessary because we are seeing just in this coming year a $9 billion tax shortfall as taxes don't come in because people have lost their jobs and property values have taken a hit. So the adopted budget was about $88 billion. That's the expense budget. So that pays for the fire and sanitation and parks and all the other services that are available to all city residents, but also, of course, to our NYCHA residents. The capital budget took a hit in many ways as well. My affordable housing portfolio, my parks portfolio, all saw significant cuts in the capital budget. NYCHA was not cut in the capital budget, thank goodness, but the capital budget is being slowed. The expense is being slowed. So as many of NYCHA's city-funded projects have had to be put on hold in the design phase, and some of those projects that are basically on pause include playgrounds, basketball courts, some community center work, some of the interior and exterior trash compactors that we were hoping to get in, and some of the heating and elevator projects that were in the design process. We hope to bring those on take them off pause, bring them back online as soon as possible. But in the meantime, we do have 20 very important NYCHA projects that are moving forward, full steam ahead. Those projects were prioritized, taking the agreement with the Southern District and all of the work that we've been doing with Bart and Dan and their teams into account. We've really prioritized mold removal, roof replacements and repairs, and projects to improve the heating systems. There are also some new capital dollars that came into the budget, and as many of you may have read, the mayor and the city council took funding from the police department budget and moved $450 million of that to renovate community centers. So NYCHA will receive capital funds to renovate 4 vacant community centers in Manhattan, Brooklyn, and the Bronx. And the Department of Youth and Community Development will receive funding to restore services in 1 community center in Queens that was lying vacant, unfortunately. An additional $87 million was allocated to expand broadband access at NYCHA developments and the surrounding communities, and we'll be announcing, I hope later this week, more details about those broadband investments. But the city is going to be spending about $157 million to expand internet service options so that 600,000 underserved New Yorkers, including about 200,000 NYCHA residents, will be able to get low cost or no cost internet service. So all of that is going forward. So good news in terms of those community centers and in terms of the broadband access, and good news in terms of the capital projects that are going forward. And while I don't like the fact that some of the projects are on pause, at least the budget has held steady there. And as soon as we start to get tax revenue, more tax revenue in, we will be able to take those projects off of pause. The last thing that I wanted to just mention, though, is that we are moving forward with the NYCHA transformation plan, the NYCHA 2.0, including NYCHA 2.0. Obviously, the disparate impact that COVID has had on our Black and Brown residents, our low-income residents, has made clear just how important it is to have an affordable home that's high quality, in a state of good repair, and has access to the internet that turns out to be such a linchpin in this quarantine state. So we are moving forward with the plans that we already had to convert many of the NYCHA apartments, 62,000 of the NYCHA homes, to a state of good repair through our PACT program. We are moving forward. We have already fully renovated and brought up to a very good state of repair 1,400 units. We have 6,400 units that are still under construction. That construction has gone forward as much as possible during the quarantine. And we have about 7,600 units that are right now in pre-construction. And that means that they will start construction at the beginning of the new year in 2021. So all of that is underway. We're working very closely with residents, with the city, with the health department, with BART, and HUD, actually mostly HUD on this one, to make sure that we're doing those repairs in a way that keeps our residents safe from COVID and that keeps our workers safe from COVID. So all of that is underway. We also have continued our programs to try to bring resources into NYCHA. We recently were able to sell air rights that couldn't be used on a NYCHA campus. They brought $25 million into that NYCHA campus to make repairs. And at the same time, they allowed affordable housing to be built right next door to the NYCHA campus. So all of that's underway, and we plan to continue even at a faster pace. We will be releasing an RFP for the next set of PACT rehabs in the next few months. And so we are moving just as quickly as we can. So I want to wrap up by saying that we are very grateful to all of the residents of NYCHA for sticking with us during this very difficult time, and of course for providing so many of the essential workers that have helped keep the city going. It's really been tremendous to see the way that so many NYCHA residents have helped their neighbors, have helped staff our food services work, to have helped staff our healthcare system, and have really kept the city humming during this time. So a special thank you to all NYCHA residents, and a thank you again to Bart and his team, and also to HUD and to Lynn Patton, who has been just, all of them have been so thoughtful in helping us work through the challenges that COVID has posed and in helping us move forward. So I really just want to thank everyone on this call for all that you do for NYCHA, and for the progress that we've been able to make thanks to all of you. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate your leadership on these important issues, particularly the budget, and that NYCHA residents do not get forgotten during this process. It's critical. So thank you for keeping them at the forefront. Relieved to hear that the capital investments were not cut this budget go round, and that a lot of the work continues even during this crisis. So again, thank you for that. Next, I would like to turn to Regional Administrator Lynn Patton. I apologize, I know we're having some technical difficulties, but hopefully you can join us by phone.
Any remarks are going to be shared with Sherrod. So I just wanted to make sure that we shared that time. Basically, I wanted to break down some of the NYCHA CARES Act funding that we've been given to date. Let me see. NYCHA's funding during the pandemic has been announced in 3 tranches. On May 8th, NYCHA was awarded $7,608,646 in tenant protection vouchers. On May 5th, NYCHA was awarded $15,843,840 in supplemental administrative fee funding. And on May 1st, NYCHA received about $149,860,175 in public housing operating funds, for a total of $173,312,661 since COVID started in March. This HUD funding is expressly for COVID. I think Eva will be able to speak better to what it's being used for, but you know, it's obviously been extremely helpful with respect to the vendors, Alliance, EastCo, certainly a lot of the PPO that we've been able to help secure for NYCHA for their staffers to ensure that they can continue to enter the residence and fix leaks and mold and lead issues, which, as we all know, are leading factors for asthma, which is a core morbidity for COVID. And we also have given, let me see here. Let's see. Let me just pull up this other document that basically says one of the other things that we've done for you guys is to issue a waiver that has assisted with the, hold on one second, let me pull it in front of me. Here it is. Wait, sorry guys. I'm a little discombobulated because of the clustering funding, but here it is. The NYCHA rental assistance waivers. Obviously, if you've been affected by, if your income's been affected by the COVID-19, you do not have to, you can qualify for the zero income policy, and you do not have to recertify for reduction. And obviously, to do that, you should contact NYCHA Customer Contact Center, which we have the number for and have been tweeting out frequently. So that's about it with respect to what I had prepared. Obviously, that's a lot of money. We're extremely proud of it. And Sherrod can bring you up to speed with respect to where the action plans stand and HUD's work on that. And also, obviously, the CAC.
Well, good evening, everybody. So currently we're working on the last final set of issues with the pest and waste action plan. We hopefully will be done with that very soon. We should be getting a draft from the annual inspection plan very shortly, within a couple of weeks. Joe Jaffe and his team, along with Mary, have been really working hard on those plans. We also will be restarting our bylaw conversation with the CAC. That starts on July 30th. So everybody out there can contact your local CAC representative so that you can get your input to them so that we can actually work on that document. So we are constantly working in the background, trying to make sure everybody is working together effectively to help all of the residents at NYCHA.
Thank you so much, Lynn, Patton, and thank you so much, Sherrod, for those updates. We really appreciate the work that HUD is doing. And next, I would like to turn it over to Federal Monitor Bart Schwartz, please.
Thank you, Asha. And I'd like to thank Lynn Patton and Sherrod for all the help they are in the work that we're doing. It is a team effort, and we meet frequently, we talk frequently, and we'll have the same goals in mind. So let me start first to talk a little bit about COVID-19, and I can't address that without first saying that my heart goes out to all of the residents of NYCHA and in the greater community who've lost loved ones as a result of the pandemic, as well as disrupting so many personal lives. It had an immediate impact on the work that we were trying to accomplish, and I want to explain how we dealt with that and how we're going to deal with it going forward. So from the start of the pandemic, everyone agreed, as you would expect, that the focus had to be on the public health issue, not on the various elements of the HUD agreement. As a result, the monitor team, after discussions with HUD and the Southern District of New York, and they're very brief discussions because we all agreed on what to do, we adjusted our activities and we intentionally reduced our interactions with the senior staff of NYCHA, which needed to focus on the health and protection of the residents and the workers in the NYCHA community. So we didn't stop working, but we made sure that time was not taken away from the senior people who were day in and day out managing the projects they had to manage. We we have many field examiners, and they stayed in the field as long as possible, but then when it became unsafe for them to be in the field, we had to limit the in-person work that they were doing, and then we're returning to that slowly now. The agreement itself doesn't really cover a pandemic, the HUD agreement, a pandemic such as we're all experiencing. And there's actually not a major role that the monitor could or should play in the dealing with the pandemic. The medical responses have to be coordinated. The city, the state, they coordinated with each other, and we left it to the professionals who deal with those issues to coordinate the efforts. But of course, since we were still around, we were still working. We're still working with many of the residents and with many of the workers at NYCHA. We did discover information or hear information that we thought would be helpful to the NYCHA management, and so we would pass that information along and make sure that it was getting to the right person. So that was the role that we had. But even with all these challenges and the worst of the crisis as we entered April, many of the daily activities that are integral to the HUD agreement and under the control of NYCHA's middle management and other personnel continued to work. From mid-March to the present, I'm going to give you a list of some of the things that we were doing, and then I want to explain a little bit more about how COVID legally impacted the work we were doing. But as Sherrod just mentioned, we worked together, completing and close to completing the Pest Waste Management Action Plan. The Environmental Health and Safety Department, which was organized as a result of the HUD agreement, conducted its investigations of the heating season's outages greater than 12 hours and resulted in making recommendations for corrections and improvements. And I'd like to really say that the Environmental Health and Safety Department did an excellent job here. Well, they acted really as an independent group, not necessarily as one there to protect NYCHA from criticism, but instead it was their job to independently reach conclusions about what could be done to improve the work going forward. I forget the number now, but if you added up the individual recommendations they made, at one point I think there were 50 of them. And NYCHA adopted all of them except for one. And my understanding is that one wasn't adopted only because it was not a recommendation that was for the entire portfolio. It was too specific for one development. The heating department initiated the pre-season maintenance program. The spring and the summer is the time to get started, and they started to implement the recommendations of Environmental Health and Safety. NYCHA's data analytics unit, called PTAD, and the monitor team continue to work on developing various data dashboards to improve capturing NYCHA information to support management, compliance reporting, and to better strategize operational and capital decisions. Excuse me. This is a critical element and one of the major focuses of the monitorship to achieve the goals of the HUD agreement. NYCHA has and had an enormous amount of information, but the information was not gathered in a way that it could be analyzed or be useful. In fact, some of the information, particularly in elevators, were not even digitized. So even if you had a way to manage it, it was all on paper. So building these dashboards is a way to identify issues and also a way to measure success or lack of success by comparing reliable information from one year to reliable information for the next year. And Asha and I were talking about this today, and we think that at the next CAC meeting, we'll try to have a demonstration of how one or two of these dashboards work so that you'll get to see the value in them. And an additional value of having these dashboards, as we were talking about in a meeting we had earlier today, one of our team meetings, many of the operational units within NYCHA are creating their own dashboards. we're not actively involved in those, so we'll be helpful if we need to be, but PTAD is certainly capable of helping those other operations. And it's because everyone sees the value of the dashboards for managing problems and for better managing the issues that these other smaller dashboards and unit and operational dashboards are now popping up. So that's really a change in all of NYCHA, which has been an influence of the HUD agreement. We continued our biweekly calls in the main pillar areas of heat, elevators, pests and waste, mold and lead, and discussed major operational and capital projects. We had separate biweekly outage meetings with the heating and elevator departments, in addition to what I've just described. We continue to work on NYCHA's organizational plan, which also is rapidly taking on the name of the transformation plan. It's probably a better name for it because the goal of that is to make changes that will make NYCHA's organization and more effective and better use of its resources. And I think you're going to hear a little bit more about that later. We work to establish the NYCHA established. We should give credit where credit is due. NYCHA established the Waste Management and Pest Control Department during this period. Never before had there been a group that together was dealing with a problem which are clearly related, and that is waste management and pests. We continued progress on many of the smaller capital projects, and NYCHA completed the planning and is now sending interns to the developments to collect information and do surveys so that every development has its own individual waste management action plan. And actually, it's even deeper than that. There's a profile that the compliance department is doing. That's a second department set up under the HUD agreement, and the compliance department has built a program to do a deep dive on many statistical aspects and data points at development by development, so that they have that profile and again can use it to address issues and measure improvement. So a lot was going on, and I really give credit to the employees who were there day in and day out. There were some dips in the attendance. We kept track of that, but fortunately, it never reached a point that some of us were afraid it might reach. The workers showed up. Those who were ill, we hope stayed home, but the NYCHA was able to continue delivering the services that were needed. Under the agreement, going back to the HUD agreement, there's a legal term that provides if an act of God occurs and NYCHA needs relief from some of the commitments it made in the agreement. It's called the force majeure section of the agreement, and it doesn't excuse or eliminate the commitments, but it is a way to help alleviate the time constraints that can't be met because so many other things are going on. And probably the best example of this so-called force majeure is the inability to get access to apartments. So I'll give you an example. During the this pandemic, the access to apartments was essentially limited to emergencies. Or as NYCHA would call it, the requests from residents for repairs that were in the categories numbered 7, 8, and 9. So that was done to protect the residents and also to protect the workers. So if you look at that, I'll try to give you an example of how this works, because there's a requirement in the agreement that NYCHA use its best efforts during this period, but best efforts is more a legal term than a practical term. I want to give you an example because there's been a lot of confusion over this. So let's say, and I'm going to make up these numbers, but let's say that NYCHA gets 100 complaints or requests for repair orders. And in a normal month, NYCHA repairs 75 of the 100. But in the pandemic, it turns out that only 10 of the 100 are either a 7, 8, or a 9 emergency. So NYCHA only repairs 10 instead of the 75. That's still best efforts because NYCHA is doing everything it can within the limits of what the pandemic has caused. An example on the other side of that, let's say that NYCHA every month pours 100 concrete slabs to prevent pests from entering into the buildings. And during the pandemic, only 10 slabs are poured instead of 100. You might say to that, well, if the slabs are in basements, the basements are available, why isn't NYCHA pouring the 100? Why is it down to 10? So you have to look at that, and what you might find out is that the basements are inside, but are not in apartments, but there are workers who have to go into the basements. And so that may have been reduced to protect the workers as opposed to protecting the residents. So you have to analyze these, and 10 out of 100 for the concrete slabs might also be best efforts. So it's not a test of how hard everybody is working. It is a test of what can be accomplished during the pandemic, and is everything that can be accomplished being accomplished. And then in accordance with that, the HUD, the Southern District, and we immediately agreed that the deadlines within the HUD agreement should be extended 3 months. And we really didn't ask for HUD to provide, for NYCHA to provide a lot of backup for that, because that would have the opposite effect of what we want. We wanted them to have time to deal with the pandemic, not spend the time trying to answer our questions. Now we're in a second phase where we'll be talking to NYCHA about what do we do now that the 90 days is over? Do you need additional time? And that we expect will be done on a task by task basis, because some have to be extended, maybe some don't, and we hope to work through that with the NYCHA staff. So that I spend time on that. I know it may be a little technical, but I think it's helpful to understand how this gets approached, because it's important to know that we're focusing on the things that can be done, not asking NYCHA to spend time on things that they can't do. So now we hope to move toward a reopening. We hope life is getting a little more normal, and that means there'll be more work orders issued, because there'll be residents more comfortable about employees coming into their apartments. We expect that will be employees who have the proper equipment, the PPE that protects them, and also that other precautions will be taken so that it doesn't contribute to anyone becoming ill. It's going to be interesting to watch what happens. My view of this may not be the same as others, but I'm assuming that during the pandemic, when residents didn't want people into their apartment, quite understandably, they weren't requesting work, since they weren't going to let anybody in to respond to the work order. Now that things are becoming more normal, and there are ways to manage entry into the apartments, I expect there'll be many more work orders issued that will contribute to an already fairly extensive backlog. And so the challenge for NYCHA now will be how to manage all of these work orders, how to set priorities. In an odd way, it's an opportunity, because NYCHA will need to do this in as an efficient way as possible. We'll be working with NYCHA to do that we asked NYCHA to form a task force to address some of these issues, and we're on that task force, and we want to help as much as possible. Again, an unintended consequence of doing lots of repairs is knocking on a resident's door too many times. If 5 repairs could be done in one visit and 1 knock on the door, that's a lot better than having 5 knocks on the door or 10 knocks on the door. So all of that will be considered as we work to figure out how to deal with the backlog that existed and the new issues that we'll be seeing. So that really brings you up to date on some of the highlights and also some of the challenges that we're facing and trying to help NYCHA deal with. I'll be issuing another report in July this month, which will cover the last quarter. There'll be some more detail in that report, but I do want to tell you it's going to be different from our prior reports. As Deputy Mayor Been described, the city's finances are in difficult shape, and everybody is impacted by that, and everybody has to be part of the solution. And so are HUD and the Southern District and the Monitor. So we have changed some of what we're doing. We've postponed some of the projects we want to do to when the city's finances are in better shape. We've reduced costs where we can, and one of the places I believe I can reduce costs without at all impacting the results is to write a different kind of report that doesn't take a big chunk or any chunk out of the budget. So you'll see a different kind of report when we get it out this month. In fact, it may be more, I'm thinking of making it more like a letter from me, hitting the highlights, maybe including documents that have already been prepared, so we're not spending time and money and energy on doing things that would take away from the other work that we're doing. So that's, I think I'll close with that. As difficult as this has been for everyone who is fighting this disease or have family members who are fighting it, we have tried to continue as best we can with the elements of the HUD agreement and our responsibilities. We'll continue to do that, and we'll continue to adjust to make sure that the focus is still on the health and protection of the workers and the residents who have to deal with all of these problems. Thank you, Asha.
Thank you so much. I definitely want to echo the sentiments that our hearts go out to all of those who are impacted by the pandemic, those who have lost loved ones during the pandemic, those who have been sick. It's hard to be in New York City and not know someone who's been personally affected. So we're deeply sensitive to that, and aware that this is a difficult time to get a lot of the work done because it inherently means interaction with residents, and that in itself poses health concerns. So the fact that health and safety is the paramount concern driving everything right now is critical. So thank you for highlighting that. Next, I wanted to turn to Deputy Monitor Dan Brownell. As Bart just mentioned, the next report is going to be coming out, but I wanted to first talk through some of the highlights from the 4th quarterly report that has been issued since we've last met.
Yes, so if you don't mind, in the interest of time, I'm only going to talk about one thing, and it's one of my favorite things to talk about, which is the heat department, and say a couple things about this past heat season. So undoubtedly, something that really assisted NYCHA this past winter was the fact that the temperatures were abnormally high. And the good thing about that is it puts a lot less stress on the boilers and distribution systems. So, you know, you have the heat source, which is usually a boiler. It could be a steam system. And then, of course, you have to get the heat from the source to the units, which are the distribution systems. And as Deputy Mayor Bean indicated, and anybody at NYCHA knows, the heating assets, the boilers and the distribution systems can best be described as being in sad shape. And so that's why these capital projects are so critical, because it's like NYCHA, the heating department, and under very strong leadership, is doing what they can to keep things going, but they're waiting for the cavalry to come. And the cavalry to come means new boilers and new heat distribution systems, rather than keep trying to MacGyver, so to speak, the existing systems with Scotch tape, glue, Band-Aids, chewing gum, whatever they have. One of the things that the heating department started this year was a weekly meeting on heat outages, which are great, and the monitor team sits in, and the head of HMSD goes through the outages for the following week with his group, who seem very knowledgeable. They clearly know these development heating systems like the back of their hand, and they go over what went wrong, what was done to fix them, and then to the extent they can to figure out what can be done more long term to make sure that things don't keep repeating themselves. So along with the data projects that Bart spoke about, where data is being used more and more to create effective strategies for maintenance and for repair, it all sort of goes hand in hand in keeping those systems up to snuff as much as they can. And hopefully next year we won't have a really cold winter again, because then unfortunately I think we'll see a bit of a different system, or excuse me, a different outcome. But I think that has been a really bright spot in a lot of things at NYCHA that are working well. Not that there aren't a lot of things to obviously keep working on, but that is something that I think is definitely working, and they very much embrace using data as much as they can to be more efficient and effective, in terms of how they use their staffing, their resources and other repair equipment. So that's really the thing that I wanted to make sure got into this conversation tonight.
Thank you for that, Dan. And I do want to highlight that all of the monitor reports are posted on the NYCHA website at nychamonitor.com. And they are typically also emailed widely to all of the tenant association presidents, city council, elected officials, other stakeholders, so that everyone can keep abreast of the work that the monitor team is doing. Okay, next I would like to open up presentations and ask Eva Trimble to give us an update, please, on the work that NYCHA is doing.
Good evening, everyone. Nice to see everyone well. Thank you for this opportunity to present tonight. NYCHA, as you've heard, has been hard at work during this pandemic. And while much of our work has seen some delay as we shifted to focus on relief efforts and response efforts, I wanted to report some updates on the transformation planning work, which is kind of back up to more than full speed. We've really hit a new momentum now with the project, and we're really excited about continuing to move this forward. This is an absolutely key element of the HUD agreement. All the compliance requirements are obviously really important, but until we change how this organization does business every day, we can't have sustainable change in any of the key pillar areas. And so getting back on track with the transformation plan was a top priority for the chair and the general manager. So we are now looking at an end of October deadline for submitting an official transformation plan to the monitor and the Southern District and HUD. Originally this was due in June, but we were happy to get an extension to continue our work. Part of that extension was, again, really to be able to have the opportunity to engage employees, residents, and stakeholders in the process. It's so key that this plan represents all of your needs, and so we wanted to make sure that we had the time to do that. So we have been working diligently. We have a transformation team that has representatives of all the key areas of the organization, as well as some consultants that we've brought on board in order to help do some studies. So some things that I know have been important to the CAC in the past has been the alternative work schedule, or AWS, and I'm happy to report that we have officially kicked off with the Public Policy Lab, which is a not-for-profit human-centered design group that is working with us to evaluate the alternative work schedule system and come up with a model that works for both employees and residents. So that just got underway a few weeks ago, and we're hoping that they'll be out in the field in the next 2 weeks doing their research and working with residents and employees to understand how we can make the system work better for everyone. We've also been working with the Service Design Studio, which is part of the Mayor's Office of Economic Opportunity, to redesign the annual review process, which is something we've heard a lot from CAC members. So we are been looking at the process from both the housing assistance standpoint as well as the resident standpoint, and coming up with changes to the user portal to make it easier for our residents to work through and get those annual reviews and interim recertifications done. And most importantly, get them done right so that the rent that you're charged accurately reflects what you can afford. So those are two key parts of the transformation plan that I'm happy to report on are moving forward as we've talked about in the past. Overall, we're focused again on decentralizing property management in order to bring more empowerment to the field to be able to react and address issues as we see them. We are working on a capitalization plan in order to take advantage of stimulus and other funding in order to truly rehab the buildings in a way that will keep them sustainable for a long time. So I'm happy to report that the transformation plan is full steam ahead, and looking forward to sharing a draft with you later this summer or early in the fall. I also wanted to take 1 minute to just talk about the broadband effort, which I know the Deputy Mayor referenced in her remarks, and I know will be covered in other remarks by other CAC members. But this is an extremely important effort as COVID has forced us all into our homes and has increased the need for connectivity, and both for adults and for children, and for people looking for work to get back into the workforce. And so the working closely with our partners at the Mayor's Office of Chief Technology Officer, as well as the New York City Economic Development Corporation, we issued a request for expressions of interest, or an RFEI, in the end of May. And we received a tremendous response to that RFEI. We've already selected 4 vendors that we're moving forward with, and we're reviewing an additional 16 proposals right now and hope to make further selections, with the idea of being able to bring free or very low cost broadband access to some of our developments. As the Deputy Mayor mentioned, the Mayor did allocate additional capital to this. So right now, the projects we're awarding are all privately funded, but with this additional city capital, we hope to reach even more developments, as well as low-income communities across the city that have a digital divide. And so NYCHA buildings actually act as an opportunity to broadcast broadband to their neighboring communities, and it's a way for us to actually connect NYCHA with the greater community in a really positive way. So we're working again with MOCTO and EDC to implement a new RFP for that capital funding, and hopefully in a month or so I'll have more information on that, as we're hoping to get the RFP out this summer. So with that, I will turn it back over to Asha, and I'm happy to answer questions later in the program.
Eva, thank you so much. I know that was music to a lot of people's ears to hear that work is being done on the AWS system. We have been hearing a lot of complaints about that. And again, echoing what the Deputy Mayor said, just talking about the importance of the broadband connectivity work that's being done, because that's critical so that everyone can stay connected in this time. So thank you for that, which segues perfectly into updates, please, from Agnes Mack, the Senior Director of DFTA's Bureau of Community Services. Agnes, please. Agnes, you're on mute, but thank you for the work that you're doing, because the seniors, as we know, are unfortunately the most vulnerable population. So really wanted to hear the work that DIFT is doing during this time. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Agnes Mack from the Bureau of Community Services at the Department for the Aging. During this stay-at-home order and COVID time, as you know, as the senior centers are not opening, but our programs and program staff have been making wellness checks and wellness calls on the seniors, and making sure that they're okay, making sure that they have access to resources that they need. One of the, we have, at the beginning of the stay-at-home order, we have made phone calls to seniors about the Get Food program to make sure that anyone who is in need of meals being delivered to their homes have signed up for the program. And subsequently, the emergency meal program has transitioned to the Department of Sanitation for management. Then subsequently, we are now almost at the tail end of the AC project, whereby we and other city agencies have been calling seniors who are eligible for receive a free AC to see if they would like to have an AC, to see if they could use an AC. So right now we are almost at the tail end of that project with a lot of ACs being installed. The other thing that we have been working on is the device distribution project, which Mocto is coordinating with our technology contractor called Oats, whereby 10,000 tablets have been distributed to seniors living in NYCHA developments. All of those devices, except for a few, have been distributed. The remaining few are the ones that are to be shipped to people who receive the device and it's not working, and we are then shipping them a replacement. Otherwise, all the 10,000 devices have been distributed. Then we are now into the phase of offering, reaching out to the seniors to find out if they are interested in receiving training on how to use the device. Oaks, which is our technology contractor, has been organizing trainers for seniors to learn how to use these tablets. They have training on introduction to Zoom for beginners, which is to teach participants to learn how to use Zoom as a feature. As you know, a lot of our senior centers now have virtual activities ranging from art and craft to exercise program to educational workshops. Our nutritionists at the Department for the Aging are also offering nutritional workshops virtually. So it's important that seniors know how to use Zoom, how to log on, and how to use the features. So OATS has training programs for that. There are also training programs on how to getting to know your tablet for beginners, learning the basic features and functions of the tablet, and how to search for resources and information on the web, so on. There are also classes for beginners to learn how to navigate the internet, use apps, send and receive emails safely, and take pictures. And then there are also more advanced classes, such as there's an introduction to Spotify, whereby the participants will learn how to search for songs and create their own playlist. I have heard some wonderful stories from our Oaks contractor as to how seniors are using the tablets. Some have searched up songs from their younger time and are enjoying music on their own. Some are using the tablets to talk to their family online. I have heard of grandparents who are also playing video games with their grandchildren remotely. Very interesting, or taking pictures and sending it to their friends and sharing conversations, using apps to just chat and, be connected with their friends. So all very exciting features. In addition to training our seniors, we the OATS, our technology contractor OATS is also providing training for our providers on how to use Zoom as a medium to provide activities to the seniors, how to engage older adults on Zoom, and how to host a Zoom session, how to host a fitness class on Zoom, how to share and learn on Zoom sessions. So those are ongoing for our senior center providers so that they would, and for the instructors, so that they will know how to use Zoom to conduct virtual activities. So we're very excited about it. The training for both participants and for providers have just started, I would say, a couple of weeks ago, and we are looking to expand and continue on those trainings. I'll be happy to answer any questions after this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Agnes. I really wanted to hear the important work that's being done with our senior population. And I'm happy to hear too that the training sessions are going on to work with all of these devices and that people are really taking advantage of that. That's so important. So next, I apologize for shifting the agenda slightly, but it was such a perfect segue. I wanted to now go back to Gina Watkins, who's with NYCHA. And Gina, if you could tell us your new title. Gina has recently received a well-deserved promotion.
Good evening. Good evening. It's so nice to hear you all's voices and know that you guys are well. We haven't had the pleasure of meeting, so it's good to hear you guys. So I am now the Assistant Director for Resident Engagement. So that is my new title. And looking forward of just, the changes and being a part of what's going on. So I just wanted to give some updates, some information. Our frame efforts are in 3 prongs. So we have broad communication to all NYCHA residents via robocalls, emails, signage in the buildings, public health messaging, and other messages to NYCHA residents. In addition, targeting outreach to seniors, resident associations, and other constituency groups, as well as our outreach partners. So we've also been in communication and maintained contact with over 200 TA presidents and leadership to keep them abreast of our efforts through newsletters, regular emails, updates, and phone calls. I've also had the pleasure to lead a Family Day task force to establish borough-wide virtual family days across all developments. That task force consists of resident leaders, NYCHA staff, NYPD, and Ms. Williams, who's actually part of this committee, was a part of the task force as well. We also established volunteer response networks. So our COVID efforts, we conducted over 100,000 individual phone calls and personally spoke to over 60,000 of our most vulnerable residents. We did this to confirm firsthand that they understood the precautions regarding COVID-19 and to identify whether they would need access to any food, medication, and any necessary health and other social services. We are restarting this campaign with a target group of residents based on robocall responses of wanting a callback. So after 3 attempts to outreach, Siebel automatically sends a letter, this program now that we are working with. This should capture people who we didn't catch in the first round. And the majority of the seniors are indicating to us that they have supported networks in place, which is great. So we've also, in our food efforts, right? These efforts resulted in over 5 million meals being delivered to over 80,000 NYCHA households since mid-April, as far as late June to date. We partnered with food banks in New York City to establish 35 pop-up food distribution days at our NYCHA campuses across the city. That was truly amazing. We also coordinated efforts with 2 donors to provide gift cards and PPE to NYCHA residents. So Adams did 7,500 reusable masks distributed to tenant leaders by our CNP staff. Sean Carter Foundation and the Smart Small also provided $200 key food gift cards for our residents of the Marcy, Tompkins, and the Sumner houses, which was over 2,000 residents in total. NYCHA also hired 1,000 per diem workers, and half of them were NYCHA residents. And they are now moving into seasonal positions. I think that was just great, just simply great. That pretty much wraps up the information, the updates, and thank you.
Gina, thank you. We really appreciate those updates and the work that your team has been doing to stay connected with the residents. I know our monitor team has also been making a lot of outreach calls to residents and resident leaders, and we have been hearing confirmation that they have been hearing from NYCHA during this time. So please continue those efforts. It's so important, the food, the PPE distribution. So heartwarming to hear about the generous donations, the key food gift cards. That's a beautiful thing, and we hope that the continued support for NYCHA residents continues. So thank you for that. Now I really want to turn to New York City Council member Alika Opry-Samuel. And last week, City Council really held NYCHA to task to find out what exactly is being done during this time. And Greg Russ, the chair, was in the hot seat. So Alika, will you please update us on City Council's work?
Can you hear me?
We can. Please proceed.
Oh, okay. Well, good evening, everyone. First, I really do want to just take time to acknowledge everyone that's listening and participating in the stream tonight. And I just want to recognize all of the residents of NYCHA, as well as staff who've been through some real challenging times over the past 4 months. And also acknowledge the lives that we've lost during the time, and the grief, anger, and sadness that comes with that, because, you know, we're talking about all of the great things now and, you know, like what's happening now, but I just wanted to really just acknowledge that we've lost a lot of people, a lot of loved ones, and families are still grieving because there was no grieving process, and people are still angry and sad. But also, you know, we focus on the hope for a better tomorrow. And so, you know, I do want to say that, you know, I am hopeful that things will be better, and they will be. But let's just also recognize that a lot of the challenges that NYCHA is facing they were facing all of these same challenges prior to COVID and prior to all of the protests and unrest. And COVID just exacerbated everything. And so I just really wanted to say that, you know, of course, I'm always in my feelings, and there was a lot said over the past hour and a half. But residents have seen their fair share of disappointments, lack of funding, and lack of prioritizing people and their needs. a lack of care and concern from the top down. And, this is a call with the federal monitor, and we see that change happens because of lawsuits and also election years. And so I just want to, just have this is supposed to be about just straight talk and honesty and just being transparent. And so I want to be able to be, my role as a city council member is to be a voice of the people that elected me to office. And my role as chair of the Public Housing Committee is to be a voice for all of the residents of NYCHA. And so I want to make sure that every time I have an opportunity to speak, it's really to stress transparency and stress better communication between everyone, not just NYCHA, but also the city administration, as well as, not just the mayor, but the governor as well, and just making sure that people are held accountable, and that coming out of COVID, we have to remember that, there's conversations around the next wave, or, what if this happens again? And so we need to make sure that there's some real lessons learned. And we're having conversations about what did we learn? What did we do wrong? Where did we go wrong? And how can we do better? And so I just really needed to put that out there, because a lot of what we're hearing right now is stuff that has taken place over the past couple of weeks. And we've been going through this for 4 months. And so what do we have to put in place to make sure that on behalf of the residents of NYCHA, there's some real, like I said, lessons learned and plans in place as we move forward. So there were two very important dates you just mentioned. We had a hearing on June 29th. The two important dates I want to talk about is June 29th and June 30th. June 29th, we had an oversight hearing on the effects of COVID-19 on the residents of New York City Housing Authority, and that was a joint hearing with not just NYCHA, but also HPD, so for all of our multiple dwelling buildings. And it's, again, to make sure that when we are talking about New Yorkers and we're talking about NYCHA, the city is holding everyone accountable. And there shouldn't be a two-tier system where, we're doing this for residents that live in affordable housing with a private developer or a private management company, but this is the protocol and guidelines for families that live in NYCHA. It should be the same across the board. So that's why we had a joint hearing. And in that hearing, we had an opportunity to hear from the chair, Greg, as well as, the compliance department and Sadia with community engagement and partnerships. And we asked some really tough questions related to, what's happening with making sure that all staffers that go in and out of the units have protective gear, and that they're, also being protected, making sure that the employees of NYCHA are able to continue to, if they can work from home, they work from home, but if they have to go into the units, that they have the equipment that they need to go in, but then also that the residents feel a sense of safety and security with someone coming into their home. And so we talked about that. We talked about making sure that NYCHA was still responding and addressing work orders. And I heard the monitor speak to conversations with the administration, conversations with NYCHA about the work orders, and just looking to see how we will continue. But, I must say that, I'm lucky, I guess, to have a relationship with Vito and Greg and Brian. And when we had when there was a need in our community, we were able to make a phone call, and they addressed those emergency needs. We even had an actual move-in of a family that was in an emergency situation where they had severe mold in their apartment and had some real health concerns. And NYCHA was able to do an emergency move of that family to a new apartment. And NYCHA went in and even renovated the apartment to get rid of the mold and move this family in. And so, I have to say, I'm thankful for people that care. And there were a lot of people that showed a lot of care and concern during this time. And I also want to recognize Lynn Patton, if she's still on, because not even at the height, but like literally at the beginning of the pandemic, Lynn, outside of way before the CARES Act, Lynn Patton did a lot as far as making sure that NYCHA had PPEs, and I wanted to acknowledge that too. That was the end of March, and going into the first week in April. So there were a lot of people that stepped up when our own executive government was just really focused on individuals who were being triaged in the hospitals and not the people who were dying in their apartments and unable to make it to the hospital or were turned away from the hospital because they didn't have every single symptom in the beginning. That was the protocol, and they were forced to go home. So I just wanted to acknowledge those individuals, because so many people did step up and they weren't in the newspapers. So we asked questions about PPE, we asked questions about work orders, we asked questions about, data sharing amongst other agencies. And we asked about the data sharing because there was a real problem and concern about how are we tracking, or how is the city tracking families in NYCHA with the concern of the high density and, families really being in an overcrowded situation, and knowing that that was a huge concern if to practice social distance spacing, and there was no mandate of mask at the time. And so we asked those hard questions about data sharing. And I actually want to speak to, I know Agnes made a comment about with DIFTA, and then Gina made comments about the wellness checks with NYCHA. That was a huge concern for council members. In the beginning, we said, if NYCHA is making calls and DIFTA's contracted organizations are making calls, and then you had healthcare organizations making calls, are people connected to make sure that there's an overlap, to make sure that every single person, every single senior, every single person that had a disability or needed like special circumstances, every single person was touched. In the beginning, they were not. In the beginning, we did not have the coordinated efforts. I know we heard about Food NYC. In the beginning, that was not a coordinated effort. The CBOs were doing food and then were told to stop abruptly, and then the sanitation commissioner stepped in, and we love her to death, but there was not a concentrated effort on how are we getting food to every single senior that lived in the high-rise apartments. Delivery guys were getting food, and if you lived in a house or a low rise, you were able to get your food. But we literally had to go in and step in and get the boxes of food to the higher floors. And that was something that was not anticipated or even prioritized with the administration. So there were a lot of, again, like I said earlier, lessons learned, and I hope that there's a after action review of some sort to make sure that we have these systems in place in the event that this happens again, or just to make sure that all residents of NYCHA and public housing are being served in the best way. And like we always say, and like I've said 1,000 times, the elected officials, again, were not part of the task force, and we were not part of the committees and meetings with the administration to hear, like what the families and residents were saying to us and complaining to the elected officials about, in order to have meaningful input as to different emergency policies that were put in place. And so I would hope that, Mr. Schwartz, that you really hear what I'm saying and take that into consideration when you go into meetings, because we're not there. the elected officials that's supposed to be the voice of the residents, when they're not necessarily at the table, at least their elected leader should be there, and we are not. And so hopefully, just putting hope in there, there's an opportunity to be able to do the right thing. So we also asked about the building maintenance schedules and how do they prioritize cleaning up the grounds, and we've seen an increase in rodents and different things. And so I know that that's all of what I just mentioned that was discussed during that oversight hearing on June 29th. We will be able to continue to have those conversations, and there are folks like yourself within this federal monitors team that's making sure that push is there. And the other date that I mentioned was June 30th, which was the very next day after the hearing was the vote on the $88.19 billion budget that the deputy mayor mentioned earlier. And the reason why I'm mentioning that is because, again, even though it was a tough budget, the New York City Council pushed really, 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 really hard to make sure that we restored funding that was removed from the budget. And I want people to know that. I want people to know that the council members worked really hard to even restore the senior funding that we see in the budget. My colleague Margaret Chin went above and beyond to push back to make sure that $1.9 million was restored for our senior centers. And I have to say that. And then the council allocated some $16.1 million in capital for 51 projects in this budget. And the projects are actually meaningful projects that should be prioritized. We were thoughtful in what we would like to see and what's needed related to security and cameras. And then we also allocated another $1.3 million in expense, operational dollars for residents directly through either the resident associations, giving them funding directly to the associations because they too purchased supplies through their TPA funds because they couldn't get it from any place else. So making sure that we're able to help them, in addition to the community-based organizations that provided direct funding direct services to the residents. And that's what the city council does. In our budget that's adopted with the city budget, we try to fill in those gaps that is left out by the administration. And these gaps are what, help to really build community. And so I just wanted to mention that. And in my district alone, I allocated $1.25 million in cameras for Saratoga Village and Ceflo, as well as another $100,000 in programmatic dollars directly to my resident associations and the CBOs. So, I'll just stop there, but I really want to stress that the council is continuing to push, like I said, after action reviews with residents and elected officials, the tracking of COVID in NYCHA to ensure that there's data sharing is prioritized, to continue to prioritize elevator repairs and getting rid of mold. We know that COVID was a respiratory system disease, a virus. Continuing to work with the CBOs because they were not necessarily considered partners during the negotiations during the height of the pandemic, but we see how important the CBOs are. And then finding ways to really meaningfully be in touch with our seniors. And I'll close there. I know that I'm excited about the tablets, the 10,000 tablets that were distributed to the seniors. And in my district alone, I have 500 seniors that were given tablets. But these are also seniors that have never been part of any kind of internet activity. And so to even be able to try to have a conversation with them over the phone about open up the tablet and this is what you do, there was a need for a greater touch. Just like with anyone else, if you're in a computer class and there's somebody in the class teaching you, there's somebody that's walking around showing you what you need to do. And so Oath is an amazing organization, but not every single senior is able to jump online based on those calls and those trainings. And I know that because we're hearing that from our district and we get those calls. But again, I'm hopeful that all levels of government will truly focus on NYCHA residents with the equity lens, and that everyone sees the need and that they will really be intentional and serving the families and individuals that live in NYCHA.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Councilwoman. I really like that focus on being intentional and really seeing NYCHA residents through an equity lens and giving the well-deserved services that everyone is entitled to. It really just has to happen from every single angle of government and administration and all of the authority. So thank you so much for highlighting that and for the important work that you're doing as a member of the City Council. And thank you to all of our presenters today. We really appreciate you taking the time to join us. Thank you so much, Deputy Mayor, for joining us as a special guest. Thank you so much for all of our CAC members for presenting. We really appreciate the information you shared so that we could all keep our fingers on the pulse of what's going on. I want to use these last 15 minutes to open it up. We have many other CAC members who might have questions or comments. We're going to focus the discussion on what we've heard today. So if you have comments about the budget or the CARES Act, the updates from the monitor or the reports coming out, the transformation work that NYCHA is doing, or any of the other updates we've heard from DFTA or City Council, please speak now. Due to the limitations of the virtual environment, I'm going to ask you to just unmute yourself, *6 if you're on the phone, and then be careful not to speak over one another. Please announce yourself and your name if you'd like to be addressed.
Okay, first of all, I'm very happy about this entire report. The presentations were elaborate. This, in a total sense, is a step in the right direction. And that goes for everything, including our new, what's the name? The resident engagement assistant director, all right? All right, all of these are steps in the right direction, and I'm very happy about that. Although much more things are needed, I do believe that the step is progressing in the right manner. I just want to take this time because I did not hear from our CAC chair, Danny Barber, and I just want to really acknowledge that this gentleman took a Penske truck and delivered food all the way up in the North Bronx area, all right, during this entire pandemic. And he has done a yeoman's job, and I just want to make that clear. But I also want to announce the fact that the reason we have a monitor is because of the lawsuit, and that lawsuit was really facilitated by Danny Barber. So I really have to give him a great round of respect and admiration on what he has done, okay? And while I say that, and you know my specialty deals with consolidation and deconsolidation, I want to talk to Eva Trimble as it lends itself to Andrew Jackson and Morrisini Air Rights, all right, in its entirety. So I have intentions of, you know, getting a one-on-one so that that can be evaluated. But I just wanted Ms. Gina Watkins to understand that what I'm doing in Gun Hill is putting the paperwork up from Greg Russ. And I want you to know that it's not bilingual, it's just in the English language. And what we're doing is streamlining it and putting it in the elevator banks of all of our buildings so that the residents know what's going on and where things are at. Okay, so this is what we're trying to do to supplement what is going on. But kudos to everyone. It's a very progressive gathering. You know, Alika Hampton Samuels, I really take my hat off to you. All right, because things are going in the right direction, and that's all I have to say.
Asha, this is Eva Trimble. I just want to say, Mr. Hall, I will follow up with you to schedule some time to talk about the consolidations.
Okay, no problem. Thank you, Asha.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hall. And you also make a good point to make sure that all communication is always circulated in multiple languages, and that we're so thankful for the Tenant Association presidents and resident leaders who have really been doing the lion's share of the work on the ground, getting the communication out, getting food out, being a support system to their neighbors. We're so grateful and thankful, and we hope too that the NYCHA's work continues so that it's, you know, NYCHA that's really doing the lion's share of that outreach work as well. So thank you for highlighting that. We did invite Mr. Danny Barber to join us this evening. He was unavailable because he's unfortunately attending a funeral for Mr. Hendricks, the young man who was killed in the Bronx, who's from his development, Jackson Houses. So our heart goes out to the Hendricks family, and we miss Mr. Barber's presence this evening, but we have invited him to join us for the next CAC meeting. And we're deeply appreciative of the work that CCOP is doing, and of course the work that they've done to get the monitor involved in the first place. So thank you for highlighting that, Mr. Hall. In our last few minutes, do I have any other members that want to make comments or questions? Mr. Gross, please proceed.
Good evening. Thank you, everybody, for being there. I would like to happy to announce one of the features what I was talking with the previous meeting about NYCHA when tenants get in a recertification or change of income. Right now, NYCHA has the new feature on the system. Every manager, every housing assistant can see how long the applicant is, how long the paperwork is submitted, a day, 30 days, 40 days. That alone speeds up right now throughout NYCHA all the paperwork. I was speaking to a manager. She loves the option to seeing how many days every single document is submitted. So right now the housing assistant knows, is it 5 days, 10 days, 15 days, what's happened with the paperwork. If something is missing, send out a letter for the residents. So right now, I think most of the NYCHA residents will benefit from that feature, and I would like to thank NYCHA for working hard to put on the feature for the managers, the housing assistants, and directors can see every submitted document from a resident, how long is on the system.
That's good to hear, Mr. Gross. Perhaps Eva or Brenda Allen, can you please speak to how widespread that system is?
So we've increased, similar to the dashboard work that Dan Burnell had talked about on HEAT, we have also been trying to build out dashboards and other administrative functions. And so all the property management staff have new reporting tools to be able to track the submission and processing of interim certifications and annual reviews. It's a continual work in progress, as with most things with NYCHA, so we're continuing to build that out as we update the portal and increase functionality. So I'm glad to hear that it's working well. There's also functions on the website now that didn't exist before, so that you can actually go in to the website and log into your case and see where things are pending from the resident standpoint as well.
Oh, that's good. Bart, please proceed.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to say that I've heard some things today which give me an idea, and Gina Watkins, congratulations on your new job. I have some work for you. I'd like, after hearing what Council Member Lika Samuel talked about, the data or the failure to share data, and that being a part of the problem with communications. One of the things that I know NYCHA's been concerned with, and I've been concerned with, is that there's such a reliance on the robocalling when many of the numbers are not good. Phone numbers are not good. They're not up. It's not updated. So maybe what we can do if there was such an effort made to reach so many people, maybe we can use that as a way to update the robocalling records and then reach more people in a more efficient way. So I'll follow up with you, Ms. Watkins, and any information that we can get out of the council hearings. We'll take a look at that testimony or any suggestions that you have for us, council member. I think it will help increase the efficiency and depth and breadth of the communications, and that's a complaint we always get from residents. So it's something worth doing, spending some time on. So that's one takeaway for me from this meeting today.
Thank you for that, Bart. Any other questions or comments? Please proceed.
Hi, my question is for Director Agnes Mack. The question is, how do the seniors who haven't received a device receive one, and who should they contact?
Would Nigel want to answer that question? Because I believe the listing, there's a matrix as to how the listing, how to come up with the listing.
Yes, this is Eva Trimble from NYCHA again. We received a donation of 10,000 tablets from T-Mobile, and we worked with the city's mayor, the mayor's office of chief technology officer, to distribute those tablets. We contacted senior residents through robocalls in developments that had both high rates of, or zip codes rather, that had high rates of COVID, as well as low broadband access. And so the areas were targeted by MOCTO in order to reach some of the most vulnerable populations. I believe at this time, all 10,000 tablets have been distributed, so there's no further available. However, we're hoping to try to get some more donations in, and if so, we will broaden how we distribute it.
Great, thank you. And also, I have a question for you, Ms. Trimble. Not a question, just a comment. I just want to thank you for addressing the AWS schedule, because when that schedule started, it lessened us for people on our development. We were already short-staffed, and now we're really short-staffed, so our buildings haven't been as clean as they can be. So that is something that really needs to be addressed.
Yes, we've heard that over and over again. So we are looking for a better way to handle this. We want the goal of being able to deliver services over longer periods of time, but we understand that we can't sacrifice that service at the same time. So hopefully towards the end of the summer, early fall, we'll have some new recommendations to unveil for you all.
Great, thank you. And also to Gina Watkins. Hi, Gina. Congratulations. I didn't get to tell you the other day on our meeting.
Great. Thank you so much, Ms. Butler, for your questions and comments. Anyone else on the group want to weigh in right now?
Yes, Joel Gross.
Please proceed.
I would like to ask if a packed red development will also benefit from tablets or from the new networking, cheap internet, or free for the tenants. A packed red development.
So right now we will explore the possibility of including packed and rad. We will also talk to those developers to see what they're offering. Many of the respondents to our RFEI actually spoke about work they did with affordable housing projects, and so we are looking at those options as well.
Thank you.
That's great, thank you. I do want to note that we're technically at the end of our time, but we did start a few minutes late due to technical difficulties. So I'm going to just ask that we all stay on for a few more minutes to allow for any other questions or comments. But I want to be sensitive to your time. If you need to go, this is the end of our hour or 2 hours. Thank you for your patience and your participation. Does anyone have any further questions or comments?
Yes, one more comment is Mr. Gross. The rent assistance waiver is also for red and packed development.
I'm sorry, the rent assistance, the rent hardship process?
The rent assistance waiver, yes.
I will have to double check on that and get back to you.
Thank you.
We'll follow up. Well, Nigel will follow up on that question. Bart, do you have a comment or question? Please
No,
proceed.
I just wanted to thank everyone for participating. This is it's a difficult time for everyone, but we're all trying to continue to do the best we can to meet our obligations. These meetings are always helpful. We learn things and they help set the priorities. So I appreciate everybody's participation this evening.
Asha, it's Vicki. Can I just answer Mr. Gross's question? I'm sorry, it took me a minute to unmute myself.
Yes, please proceed.
Mr. Gross, in a PACT or RAD development, the tenant's rent is limited to 30% of their income. So if there is an income decrease, like a job loss, then the rent is decreased as well, just as it is in NYCHA. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you for
FDNY basically, since the start of the pandemic, had some ideas in terms of how to basically educate the public in general. Now, given the need to basically work remotely, and from a digital format, FDNY established fdnysmart.org/connect, which we are uploading now digital content that covers all bases of fire safety and fire safety prevention education, ranging from the importance of having a working smoke alarm. We're going to basically now upload a video talking about how to install a smoke alarm, now pairing it with alarm distributions, hopefully within the next 3 weeks once we mobilize our fire safety team. But we have a wide catalog of different topics which we've now created, and we're in the process of now doing voiceover and having those videos available in the top 10 LEP languages. So we are aiming to work with NYCHA not only to provide that website, but also to see about working with resident associations potentially to coordinate virtual training for residents through our fire safety education unit. But again, we will be sharing the website now that the whole catalog of videos are up. And as I mentioned, we are getting it translated in the top 10 LEP languages, and we are going to be doing comprehensive outreach to basically educate the general public regarding all these different resources.
Great, thank you for that update. And one of the things that we were doing right before COVID hit was coordinating with FDNY and resident leaders to do in-person training. So we're so glad to hear that the virtual options are available now, because it's so important to continue that, especially now that people are in their houses more, people are using, dependent on overloading electrical units, etc. There's so many things going on that can contribute to fire concerns that awareness and the safety trainings are critical. Thank you for that update. At our next CAC, we will hear from the other half of our CAC members. Thank you so much for participating. We look forward to hearing the updates from our resident leaders, from DYCD, from again from HUD and NYPD, more from FDNY. We always put NYCHA on to give us updates, so thank you, Eva, for your contributions today. So with that, I think I want to just give one last opening. Any other comments or questions? If not, I will turn to Bart, please, to close us out. You kind of just did that, but you'll get the last word.
Okay, well, once again, I thank you. I thank you, Asha, for all the work that you've done to put this together, and also to Florida Hudson, who's behind the scenes and has done a tremendous amount of work to make sure that we're able to have this meeting today. So thank you to both of you. And just a reminder that we're always available between meetings. You can always reach us if you need to, and we're happy to talk to anybody who wants to talk about an issue or thinks we can be helpful. So thank you, and please be careful.